Hello, I am really excited that I'm going to be going on holiday soon. I'm getting to that point with work where I feel like I just really need some time off. And of course, one of the most fun things about going away is planning what books I'm going to bring with me. And I have here two giant stacks of books to look through and consider. These are all titles that have been published in the past several weeks, and some publishers kindly sent me, and others I bought myself. So I would love to know if you have read any of these books and if you would recommend them, or if you're interested in reading them after you hear me talk about them here. So I'm going to go through each one, and first I have a few books by authors that I've read before, and so of course I'm really eager to read their new work. And firstly, there is Deborah Tomkins, whose novel Earth was one of my favorite books that I read last year, and she has a new book out now called The Wilder Path, and this is about a woman who feels like she needs to get involved in helping to combat climate change. And during this, she finds herself caught in a cave on the coast during a giant storm, and so she has to take shelter in this cave. And while she's there and fighting for her survival, she's reflecting on the past. So it's about grief and family and mental health and environmental issues. And she has such a unique style of writing that I think she is such an exciting author. Then there's the new novel by Catherine Lacey, and this is a very tricksy book in that I don't even know entirely how to hold it up. Do I hold it up like this, or do I hold it up like this? I think it's kind of a blend of memoir and fiction about a relationship and breakup that Catherine Lacey had. And so I absolutely loved her previous novel, Biography of X. And this story, it's the text goes like this, but later on in the book, it switches upside down. And so I think at a certain point in the book, you need to actually physically turn it upside down to continue reading the story. And I just love when books are kind of interactive like that, where you have to kind of like flip it around and change the way that you're actually looking at the text to understand it. And so I'm not entirely sure whether it's best to start on the pink side or the blue side, or but yeah, it kind of feels like Ali Smith's book, the How to Be Both, where it's a story in two parts, and probably your interpretation of the story will depend on which part you start with. Next is a new novel by Claire Adam, who wrote the absolutely beautiful book Golden Child, and this is called Love Forms. And this is the story of a woman named Dawn who, when she's a teenager in Trinidad, she gets pregnant and she leaves the island to have the child and give it away. And it follows her life going forward, but at one point, much later in her life, she is contacted by someone who says that she is her long-lost daughter, and so it follows the drama and heartache of that. The Benefactors by Irish author Wendy Erskine, and I've read some of her short stories before, but this is her debut novel, and this follows the voices of a number of different characters. It's called a polyphonic novel, but it primarily focuses on three different women who are mothers to boys who are accused of sexually assaulting a girl. And so it follows the connection between these women as they try to sort out the truth about what happened and are reckoning with their sons. The Devil Three Times by Rickey Fayne, and this novel begins with a woman named Yetunde who is taken aboard a slave ship bound for America, and amidst the hell of this experience, she makes a deal with the devil, who grants her protection and supernatural powers, and these powers are passed down through generations of her family. So it's in part a family saga and a very gripping story. Spit by David Brennan, and this novel is about a small town where a death occurs, and this causes a lot of rumors to arise and secrets to be uncovered, and it follows a group of local boys who dream of escaping this area. And this is published by Epoch Press, who are publishing some really exciting and interesting new books. The Mare by Angharad, Hampshire, and this novel was recently shortlisted for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, and its story is based off from the life of a real historical woman who was a guard in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II, and she was known as the Mare because she was known for kicking prisoners to death. But after the war, she met an American man and she moved to the States, and this man and nobody else in her life knew about her past. But then she is found out and discovered, and it's about that process of reckoning with her personal past and this larger history of the war. Kamchatka Chronicle by Allan Vorda, and this is a historical novel about two natural scientists in the 1700s, one who discovers a series of plants which assist sailors to counteract scurvy, and another natural scientist who also discovers a range of new plants, but also a tribe that has been very isolated and removed from society. And maybe it's just my own ignorance, but I don't know all that much about the region and country of Kamchatka, other than growing up playing the board game of Risk, and that's my only frame of reference for this. So I think this will be a very educational novel for me, and it also sounds like a really interesting historical story. The Hounding by Xenobe Purvis, and this novel takes place in a small English village in 18th century England, and it follows a group of girls who are rumored to transform into dogs, and there are also rumors of witchcraft, and so it's following the lives of these girls in the local area and what's really happening with them. It sounds like a really creepy and intriguing story. Next, I have another novel with quite a creepy cover, and it's called I Gave You Eyes and You Looked Towards Darkness by Irene Sola, and this follows a very old woman who is in a house high up in the mountains of Catalonia, and who is close to dying, and as she is dying, all of the women who have inhabited this house from the past 400 years visit her, and there is this unspooling of all of their memories, and so it sounds like such an intriguing story. A Pair of Wings by Carole Hopson, and this novel is a fictionalization of a real historical figure of Bessie Coleman, who was a young African-American woman in the early 1900s, and she dreamed of becoming a pilot, and she traveled to France and actually became a pilot, and so it follows her story and the struggles she went through, how she found a new sense of freedom, of flying in the air, and the author Carole Hopson, she is a pilot herself, so I think she brings a lot of her own experience into this fictional story. State of Emergency by Jeremey, and this is a novel about a young woman who leaves her family behind to fight for freedom in the 1940s and about the consequences of this throughout the generations. And it's about leftist movements and political detentions in Singapore and Malaysia. And Jeremey is a translator who's translated many, many different books, but this is his own debut novel, Blurred by Iris Wolff. And this novel is about a young woman who leaves her village in Transylvania because she fears for the life of her child. And that child grows up under an oppressive regime in Romania. So it's about people's untold stories. And I think this novel was a bestseller in Europe, but it's been translated into English for the first time. It's Not the End of the World by Jonathan Parks-Ramage. And this story is set in the year 2044 when the world is in conflict and strife, but it follows a very privileged gay couple in California who are so incredibly rich that when they have a newborn baby, they want to throw a giant lavish party, but then a possibly apocalyptic event occurs which disrupts this. And so it's about this very dramatic story, and I like this really vibrant cover. Ordinary Love by Mare Rutkoski. And this story follows two young women who meet early on in their lives in college and form a very strong bond with each other and possible romantic connection. But then later in their lives, they've gone down very different paths, where one is an aspiring Olympic runner and the other has a seemingly picture-perfect life with a husband and children, but then they reconnect, and it's about the potential for a new romance between them. Anyone's Ghost by August Thompson, and this is also a gay romance that takes place over many years in the lives of its protagonists, who meet when they're teenagers, and they're very different from each other personality-wise, but they have a number of reconnections over time and accidents which might tear them apart or bring them together. And I've been wanting to read this novel ever since it first came out, but it just came out in paperback recently, and it reminded me how much I want to get to this book. Next, I have a poetry collection by Michael Mullen called Goonie, and these poems are about queerness and being Scottish. They invoke a lot of Glaswegian humor, and I think there'll be so many terms and words in this which will be new to me. I have a Scottish friend who is from Glasgow, and so I'll probably need to consult him at some point to get the full meaning of some of the terms in this poetry, but I think it'll be really fun to explore. Bone Horn, and I think this sounds like such a unique novel. It's about a woman who's a private investigator who is tasked with trying to uncover the mystery about the relationship between Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, and whether Alice B. Toklas actually had a horn, as Picasso claimed. And so it's about this exploration of history of queerness, but also academic research. Paradise Garden by Elena Fisher, and this novel is about a girl on a housing estate who rarely leaves her local area, but when her grandmother comes and tells her about her family past, it inspires her to go on a road trip to try to reconnect with her long-lost father. The Treasures by Harriet Evans, and this is a novel which I find it challenging to know what the story is really about from the description in the inside cover, but it follows two individuals who are trying to trace the story of their family past through particular objects. And it's the first novel in a trilogy, which makes me really curious to begin it, but also I really like on the inside cover there's a map here, and so how this physical landscape kind of reflects their family history and past and where their family have lived. Fulfillment by Lee Cole, and this is a novel about two brothers who are very different from each other as they grow up. One of them begins working in cargo distribution, and the other becomes a writer and academic, and who marries. And they reconnect in their family home at a later date, and it's about this reckoning with their past, but also with the present. The Burial Plot by Elizabeth McNeill, and this is a historical novel that takes place in 1839, following a young woman who is running away from a crime, and she secures a position as a lady's maid in a grand house on the Thames, but the mistress of this house died recently, and there are secrets in this household which collide with her own personal secrets. And I really enjoyed Elizabeth McNeill's writing in the past. Her debut novel, The Doll Factory, I think was excellent. And this is another book that has a little map on the inside cover of this grand house. Next, I have a couple of short story collections, and I always like to bring short stories on holiday with me because I like to read them to my husband aloud. So first, there is a collection called Hunter, and this is a collection of Chinese short stories that is translated by Jeremey, whose debut novel I mentioned earlier. And these are tales about ordinary life in China, but they have a magical realist spin on them and invoke a lot of dark humor. And I think the cover of this is absolutely beautiful and haunting. Then I have an anthology of stories called Be Gay, Do Crime that is edited by Molly Llewellyn and Crystal Buckley. And these stories are about queer chaos, but also about a queer experience that isn't often included in fiction, about older queer lives and trans lives. And I like fiction, queer fiction, that doesn't feel like it needs to, have sort of positive representation, but can represent all the messiness as well as the joy of queer life. Deep House by Jeremy Atherton Lynn, and this has the fun subtitle of The Gayest Love Story Ever Told, where the author recounts his own personal history with his partner and how for a period of time they weren't able to marry because gay marriage wasn't legal. So it's following the history of the struggle for equality in this way, but also tracing their own personal tale. And I loved reading Jeremy Atherton Lynn's previous book, Gay Bar, which is about the history of a number of different gay bars. And it's really touching. On the back of this book, there's an endorsement from the late, great Edmund White, who says, "Deep House goes from the Penserosa of the best history of marriage equality to have the allegro of a very hot gay love story told in the funniest, most tender way." The Life of Those Left Behind by Matteo B. Bianchi. And this is a memoir and story about the author's own past, where he had a relationship with a man for several years, and shortly after they broke up, this man committed suicide. So it's about dealing with the grief and the difficulty of all of those feelings that he's left with. And there's an endorsement on this by the great writer Peter Cameron, who says, "This is a brilliant exploration of an unbearable loss, a unique and important contribution to the literature of grieving, loving, and living." Alone by Daniel Schreiber, and this is translated by the great novelist Ben Ferguson. And this is a nonfiction exploration on the state of aloneness, how many people are living in isolation and in solitude much more than any time in the past, and it's exploring the reasons and consequences of this, of the benefits of solitude, but also the difficulties of it, and about the meaning of friendship and connection with other people. And this is a subject I think is really fascinating because, I always vacillate between being the states of desiring to be alone, but then also feeling loneliness at different points. And so I think there's a kind of tension there that is really rich and interesting to explore. The Strangers by Echo Eschen, and this is a nonfiction book that looks at the lives of 5 different Black men, including Malcolm X and the academic Frantz Fanon and the footballer Justin Fashanu, and their lives seem very different from each other, but they all encountered issues and challenges to do with being Black men in society, and so he traces the connections, surprising connections between their lives and experiences, and this has endorsements like from the great writer Caleb Azuma Nelson, who says this is astounding, told with rigor and intimacy. The Strangers portrays just what it means to be alive, and also an endorsement from Noreen Masood, who says, this book is life-changing. I want to press it into so many hands. It Used to Be Witches by Ryan Gilbey, and this is an examination of the history of queer cinema and the evolution of it over time, but it is also a personal account of the author's own experience and the impact that queer cinema has had upon his life. And finally, there is the memoir Lifelines by Julian Hoffman, and this is about a couple who in the year 2000 become disillusioned with city life, so pick up and move to a remote corner of Greece, and it's about how they are trying to establish themselves there, but also are exploring the past and the history of this region of Europe. And on the inside cover, there is a great map here, and I just always find that so enticing when I open up a book and see a map inside like that. But those are all of the new books that I want to talk about, and so yeah, I'm really spoiled for choice of what I want to take on holiday with me. But like I said, if you have read any of these books and want to recommend them or steer me away from them, please let me know about that in the comments below. Or if you're interested in reading any of these books now, I would love to hear about that. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.